Okay, so I forgot to record from the very, very beginning, but we're just talking about harosas and how delicious it is, how everyone loves it, and they eat it with their matzah. Um, so what does everyone loves it and everyone eats it, but what does harosa actually represent?
The
And that's
mortar.
and that's what Carrie started to say. So let's read text number one. Carrie, since you're the one that mentioned
What
it,
page are we on?
page 212.
Page number one. One?
Yeah.
Okay. Liz Riven, what's your Haroset story? Oh, from
That's where it comes from.
www.kosherlikeme.com. Desperate for something to eat, as the Passover Seder progression delays the dinner, we welcome the moment when we are free to pile haroset on our matzah. Ironic, isn't it, that while haroset represents the mortar used to make bricks when we were slaves in Egypt, it is somehow the tastiest symbol at the Passover Seder.
Yeah, okay, so the mortar is like the cement. It represented the hard work that the Jews had to do in Egypt, the slave. It wasn't something light and easy. It wasn't something pleasant and delicious. It was something really not good. And we'll discuss more of all the pain about this mortar. But we make harosas to represent that and to remember that. So why would we eat something so sweet and good to represent something that was so painful or something that we suffered through? Isn't that interesting?
So we can appreciate.
But everything else is, we have the maror and everything else. It's bitter, it's salty. It's not. Oh, this is the great flavor.
Uh-huh.
So this is different. The only good. Maybe
It's something good. Okay.
because this is the only good tasting part.
Good tasting.
We're also celebrating the freedom that we don't have to do that anymore.
Okay, good answers. Good answers. Okay. So believe it or not, it's not some new age thing that everyone loves eating their harosas with their matzah or whatever it is, but there's actually discussion about it in early halachic work about having the harosas and the matzah. So let us read text number 2, Ariel.
Rabbi Amram wrote, one should recite the Hamoti blessing, then dip matzah in charoset and eat. Maimonides also included this rule. I don't understand the reason for this dipping. Rabbi Avraham, son of Natan, who authored the Manchik, asked if matzah represents liberation and charoset represents the mortar. How can they be combined?
So different foods at the Seder have different meanings, as we know, right? Everything is symbolic. And matzah represents freedom, because that's the first food we ate as we left Egypt. It showed we were free, we can get out. Marar represented the bondage and the suffering, and the haroset also represented this. And here we have Rabbi Amram and Maimonides both agree that it should be a custom at the Seder to dip our matzah into harosas and eat it. And there's this Rabbi Abraham who says, no, how could we eat it together? Matzah is liberation, harosat is suffering. And what's interesting enough, it goes all the way back, this discussion goes all the way back to the 9th century about dipping our matzah in process. So it's interesting. It's not some new.
Weren't they discussing it earlier than that? Was with Hillel and Shammai.
Not,
they call it the Hillel sandwich. So
that's so the reason when we eat the harosat, that we dip the maror in the harosat, and then it happens to be part of the Hillel part of the matzah.
Yeah.
But really, the real Hillel sandwich was with the lamb, with the Pesach sacrifice, with the korban Pesach. So we don't have that. We skip that out, but the harosas today is dipped in the maror is dipped into the harosas, but not the matzah.
Okay, say it again. The maror?
We dip the maror, the bitter herbs, into the harosas when we eat it. And we make the Hillel sandwich, it's the maror, but part of the maror is the harosas. So we dip the maror into the harosas, we put the matzah on it, and then we eat it.
So it used to be you did that and you had the Pesach sacrifice.
Yeah.
Or was
no, you had that together with the Pesach sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you even had the maror with it. Matzah maror, yeah, Pesach. Yeah. That's what we say. We say that Hillel used to take all three symbolisms of the Seder, like of those three things, and eat it together.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't.
But we eat the matzah and the maror. With the lettuce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we say this is what Hillel did in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Anyway,
We did it separately.
separately and then together.
Okay.
Okay, so let us go through now these symbolisms. 1 second. So the matzah is okay. Text number 3a, Lisa.
Yes. Why do we eat bitter herbs? Because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt.
Okay, and charoses was reminds of the mortar that they needed to use to make the bricks. Now, what happened? They didn't always have to make their own bricks. But let's read 3b, and then I'll explain. Sylvia.
Moses famously complained to God, "Why have you harmed this nation?" Our sages explain in the Aggadah that this was a reference to the mortar. For when the Jewish people ran short of mortar to make bricks, the Egyptians ground Jewish babies into powder and used them as filler for the mortar.
So I've heard a little bit differently.
I heard.
Right, I never.
that.
I heard they took the
put them-
babies and they stuffed them in the empty holes. If there was a brick,
Yeah.
those enough bricks, they would put a baby instead. So yeah, it was a terrible. So think of the Nazis. Think of the Holocaust, of
Yes.
crazy stories that you've heard. So similar to that, and equate the Egyptians at that time. But basically, when Hashem sent Moshe to advocate for the Jews to tell Paro, let the Jews go, they have to go pray to God in the desert for a few days. That's how it started. He didn't say we're taking them out and that's it. So he went to Paro, and Paro said, "Oh, they have so much time to think that they're thinking about vacation. Okay, I'll give them more work, and then they won't have any time to think about vacation." And he said, "Now instead of I'm not going to give you straw anymore." You have to make your own bricks. You have to figure it out all yourselves. And when they did that, it was much harder for them. So it made their lives harder. They had to work more. And if they didn't have enough bricks or they didn't make enough bricks, they would take Mara would take the babies and just stuff it in the wall. Or here it says grind up. I never heard the grind up thing either. I don't know if it was discussion was translated right. I don't know. In the Hebrew, actually, let me see what it says in the Hebrew. Mesiman b'nei Hamshel Yisrael b'nei. It does say would put them in. It doesn't say grind. I know because I know the class was a discussion if they actually ground it, and we were discussing.
I know what
Agada is like add-on stories in the Talmud.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, so when so Hashem, so then Moshe cries to Hashem, "What have you done to the nation? Like what did they do so bad? How could you harm them so much that they have to see such suffering of the babies being killed like that?" And yet, then now you didn't eat your haroses, even though it's something sweet and good, you start to think, "Oh my gosh, what is this haroses? It sounds so bitter."
This is a bad translation.
Yeah, it's a bad translation. Yeah.
They put the babies in place of. They couldn't make
Well,
enough
that was
bricks,
also
so they put
bad.
babies in place.
Right, that was
Yes.
also bad.
But
Yeah.
when you think of the haroset,
Right.
it's like,
Right. Okay.
So it's
Yeah. Okay. So let's read 3C.
yeah, get on board with that translation.
Yeah, that's what we were
Round
discussing.
and-
That it wasn't like good, and
Oh,
yeah, like one of the rabbis.
You want me to read, sorry?
Oh, listen, Sylvia read already.
I just read.
Okay, so yeah, okay, Valentina, you can read.
Okay. Why do we eat matzah? Because our ancestors had no time to let their dough rise before the King of all kings. The Holy One blessed be Him, revealed Himself to them, and redeemed them.
So matzah is the food of our freedom. So it's definitely surprising. So it's not just that harosis represents this like suffering or not such a good thing, but matzah represents freedom. Harosis represents the bondage. Why should we eat them together? Doesn't seem like it's a good mix, right? Kind of weird. Like, what's going on over here? And then some people will say, "Hey, the harosis tastes better than the matzah," right? But anyway, so we have the Rambam Maimonides who says, yes, we should dip the matzah in charoses. We should put them together. Then we have this Rabbi Abraham, the Ravid, who says, don't mix them together. They're not a good mix. One's suffering, one's freedom. Why should they go together? So let us read.
he did not like Maimonides, did he?
I guess not.
When I just read the beginning.
Yeah. But that's how they spoke to each.
Yeah.
So
Once again, he
Maybe
didn't give
to
a
ease the
reason.
suffering.
Huh?
Maybe to ease the suffering.
So let's read on. Eileen, you want to read number 4, text 4?
Sure. Okay. Abraham said, "This is nonsense. Once again, Maimonides failed to identify a reason for his ruling. The truth is that over the last few centuries, many of our teachers of blessed memory believed that the matzah over which we recite the Hamotzi blessing should not be dipped in charosis, and this is the prevailing custom."
Okay, so two things. So what they would take when they would make the bracha on the matzah at the seder, the first time they could take a bite of matzah, they would actually dip it within the charosis and then eat it. Like we dip, matzah, take salt, But at the seder, we don't put salt on our matzah. We just eat the matzah.
That's right.
And in the in the old days, there were times when they did dip the matzah in the charosis and then they would eat it as part of the matzah, ritual at the seder.
Isn't that what's in the Haggadah? We do
Not
that.
anymore. No, so we don't do that. But this is a discussion if we should do it or if it should be done, if it shouldn't be done.
Oh, we do it.
No, but you do it when you make the bracha on the matzah when you first.
Right.
Huh?
I don't understand the order, but when we're
So
doing
this is what you do.
charosis,
The order is like this. You do the whole Haggadah.
and you're supposed to shake it off, like
No,
dip
that's
it
on
and
the
then
maror.
shake it
So
off.
that's on the maror, and that's on the Hillel sandwich. That's what we were discussing before.
Oh,
I don't think so. But it's not on the matzah itself.
oh, right.
Okay.
Right. The part of the seder where you're just eating the matzah where.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
what is the case for people who say that we should dip the matzah in a charosis? Where does Maimonides get this idea that it's a good thing to mix these two opposite symbolisms together? So anyone here, I know anyone here who's like, either artistic or plays around with graphics and stuff like that, when you're thinking of visual marketing, right? When you're trying to, make a nice picture or try to attract attention, right? You start to think of the contrast of colors. Like, how can I make this thing look good? How can I draw this to that, right? How can I shadow it right? Or like, if you want to like edit a picture, like how much of a contrast or do you do or don't do, like when you're playing around with the coloring. So that will affect how we see something, how we see a picture, right? How we see a design, whatever it is. Okay. So and we'll see in text number 5. So we're gonna say maybe the contrast of the two things brings something out. Contrast of the matzah and the contrast of the charosis. So let's read text number 5. This is just a cutesy. I don't know why they have this in here about marketing. Text number 5. I'm back to Carrie.
Okay, good photographic lighting entails more than understanding how light works. It also requires an understanding of the emotion that lighting scenarios portray. How the lighting sculpts, forms, or informs the emotional elements of an image helps drive a photograph's narrative. Then light becomes more than a way to illuminate a scene. It becomes a determining factor of the image and how the viewer perceives the people or objects in it.
Okay, the same with ideas, right? The suffering and the darkness contrasted by the joy and the liberation and the freedom, right? So the Haggadah tries to bring this out, right? How much the Jews suffer. They cried out to Hashem, all the different terrible things that happened, and then we eventually go to, and then Hashem brought the plagues and took the Jews out with a mighty hand. So we see this at play in the Haggadah itself. So when we underscore the darkness and the suffering, that highlights the joy and the liberation of the story of Pesach, of the story of Passover. Okay, so let's read text number 6, Ariel.
We begin by declaring that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt and describe all the suffering he imposed on us. Then we conclude with the miracles and wonders performed for us and with our liberation.
Okay, so here we have this great contrast in the Haggadah. So the terrible bondage to the feeling of freedom. So it says and one of the important things it says in the Haggadah is if God had not redeemed our ancestors, we would still be enslaved to Egypt today. So think of that. That kind of brings it to you. Like, why do we have the Seder? To make the Exodus personal, to make the story personal to us. Hey, if Hashem wouldn't have brought these miracles, we'd still be there. We wouldn't be here. So it really affected us. So we really have to look at the story from a personal light and not from a kind of like that happened there many years ago.
Right.
Text number 7, Lisa.
In every generation, we are required to visualize ourselves exiting Egypt. God did not only liberate our ancestors, he liberated us with them.
Okay, so that's also another very important thing. Every generation, we need to remind us that as if we have to think that as if Hashem took us out of Egypt today. So what always makes things more real? What makes things more tangible? What makes you really feel it? When you eat, right? Food somehow always like, right? If I'll say, think back to some, even the Seder. Think back to some Seder when you were a young child. You're going to start thinking of some food that you had, right? Or some food relation, something to do with the food a lot of times. So we eat the maror and we choke, right? We really feel it. So why, so then, what's this idea of eating the matzah with the charosas? That will make sense because now we're gonna have the contrast. We're gonna have like the charosas, which reminds us of the, terrible suffering, and then we eat with the matzah. But hey, we got liberated from this. We don't have the suffering anymore. Something good happened, and that should make us like really, really feel the freedom. So 1 second.
Whisper the explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, so text. Hey, no, we're not even there yet. So way to go.
Okay.
1 second. I have to this thing. Okay, yeah, get 8. Yeah.
I can read if you want.
Sylvia's gonna read first. Like I'm just trying to keep the order.
Okay. We might suggest that the purpose of dipping matzah into haroset is to remember that God liberated us from the bondage of mortar as symbolized by the haroset and granted us freedom as symbolized by the matzah.
Okay, so we really have to feel, really have to remember, it really has to connect to us deeply. So like there's this famous story about a news anchor that gets on the 5 o'clock news, evening news, and starts to say a story. And as they're saying the story, this like terrible tragedy, he starts to choke up and cry. And I was like, what do you mean? Every night you say the 5 o'clock news, and you're always able to say it like a news anchor, straight. He's like, yeah, but I'm always just saying a story. Tonight the story is about my father. I didn't realize until I got on to say the story. So all of a sudden it's personal, and you have a different emotion about it. So the same thing here. When we eating that harosas and that matzah, we really are saying, hey, this is, we want to really feel it. Yes, I'm feeling the suffering that my ancestors felt, and I would be there today if it wasn't for Hashem saving us. And then, wow, but Hashem saved us. So look how good this is. It's such a good thing that Hashem saved us. And, and then you remember all Hashem's miracles. So that's very nice. But does that help us now? Some people might say, hey, we're not free now. Yeah, we might have easier lives, but we're still under the confounds of other nations. We can't, when Jews are, especially now we feel it, we see it so much more, so much stronger than we felt in many, many years. And we're living in these dark times. So are we really free? Maybe when we eat that haroset and we start to think of the suffering, it's going to trigger in us. And we'll say, oh no, like this is so terrible, it's so hard. We're still not feeling free. We're still not feeling free. It's not fair. And even if we have the matzah, it's not really going to do anything for us. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to maybe get us stuck in the negative and not really put us to the positive side. But wait, Hashem liberated us. Especially now because we're in exile. There is pain. Things aren't so good. You might feel kind of a little raw. Do we really feel the liberation, or are we still suffering? Okay, so Rabbi Avram's saying, hey, it's too risky. We don't want people to get stuck in the negative. We want people to, they're in pain, they're suffering. Everyone has their issues going on in life. We don't want people to start to eat that harosas and think about the mortar and think about what the Jews had to go through and then get stuck there. It's not worth the chance. We want to keep the Jews to feel liberated and free and remember that Hashem took us out and be positive. So maybe let's just keep it separate. Not a good thing to keep it separate. But the Rambam said, no, it's worth it. Let them eat both together because then they'll remind them of the liberation and it's not going to affect them in a bad way.
I didn't know they put this much thought into it. Like interesting.
Remind me at the end, there's an interesting story here I want to share. Okay, so 1 second. So we're going to take a little deeper meaning into it. So we're not done yet with that thought into it. We're going to look more into this argument of for eating those two foods together or against eating those two foods together. So to unpack it further.
Arguments about how to put on your shoes.
Really?
Yes. Okay.
The discussions and arguments about how to put on your shoes.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
other people would be arguing about.
So to unpack the reason, also we have to understand the long-term effects. So is it generational trauma? The Jews, right? First we were in Egypt and we were suffering in exile there. Then the Babylonians took us into exile. From there we went to Persia, Greece, Rome, the Almohads, the Christians, the Bolsheviks, right? We go on, the Nazis, the communists, now the Islamists, the fundamentalists, whatever you want to call them, the terrorists. We're just going through destruction, devastation, expulsion, the Crusaders, the Inquisition, the pogroms, the Holocaust, the gulags, the terror attacks. So we have all these crazy things. Is there reason to celebrate as Jews or not? You know, are we in the Harosis time or are we in the Matzah time? What's going on over here? Text number 9. How can we really feel freedom this time? Oh, going Valentina, your turn. Go for it.
Okay, finally. When Jews exited Egypt, they become recipient of intrinsic godliness.
Godliness.
Oh, godliness. Yeah, sorry. It's so small on my phone.
Okay.
And therefore remain forever free. Jews are inherently free because they are I have to make it big, I'm sorry, are intrinsically holy. Circumstantial factors cannot undo inherent truths. Even when Jews are under circumstantial subjugation, they are inherently free.
Okay, so a core truth of Jewish thought explains why the Seder is so important, why it's so important to have this bitterness and the sweetness together. So, but when the Jews were in Egypt, we're not yet a nation. Like we weren't, it was before Mount Sinai, it was before God gave the Torah. So when the Egyptians subjugated our bodies, when we were in bondage, our souls were also in bondage. We could have easily abandoned Judaism and turned, and the Jews were at a very low point. It says that they were at the 49th lowest step to unholiness, and if they would have fallen one more step, they would never been able to be redeemed. And then as they went to receive the Torah, they got improved every day until they got the Torah. But once the Torah was given, Hashem put a piece of Him into each and every one of us. Ever heard of the Pintalayed, or the essence of our soul, spark of Judaism, a spark of godliness in each of us, and that will never disappear. That will never go away, and that is within every single Jewish soul. And that piece of you is always free. That piece of you is the essence of Judaism, the essence of who we are, and that can never be held hostage. That can never be taken away from us. So that inner essence is like this inner freedom that we all have, and it's a part of God. It's connected to God, and so because of that, our souls can never be held hostage. Only our bodies. So, the previous Chabad Rebbe lived in Russia in the time of communism, and the Soviet regime was very adamant about getting rid of religion because they felt that separated people and didn't keep people all equal, or for whatever other reasons.
But loyalty should be to the state.
Exactly. And they shut down all religious institutions. They stopped all Jewish practice, and you could get arrested and killed and everything else for having any crime that had to do with continuing Judaism. So he defied that, and he kept on opening and funding and creating schools and synagogues and mikvahs and making sure baby boys had circumcisions and Jewish chuppahs, everything. And so he was arrested many times. So his big arrest was in 1927, and he was sentenced to death, but that was retracted, and then it was to I think 10 years of heavy labor, and then that was retracted, and then he was sent a 3 years exile to a small town called Kostroma. And believe it or not, so the way they did it was once you like had this destination of where you were exiled or where you were sent to, you went on a regular train, like a commuter train, and you kind of bought the ticket, and then they took you to your destination, and then you were dropped off there or whatever. And so his train stopped so in the end, because there was tons of pressure from the outside, he was released after 9 days of living in Kashrama. But on his way to this little town of Kashrama to go to exile, his train stopped in Leningrad, which was like a big city. What's today? Leningrad, St. Petersburg? Yes. And many Hasidim gathered, many of his followers gathered to stop and see him because like he was already in prison for a few months, and now he was going on to this place. They don't know what was going to be. They don't know if he'd be alive. They didn't know if they would be alive because a lot of them were always taken in as being arrested for like doing his bidding or for doing Judaism. And this is what he said at the train platform. He stopped and he gave a small speech. Okay, so this is very powerful. Think of the circumstances. Thinking he's illegal. What he's doing is illegal. He's on his way to prison for being illegal, and this is what he says. Text number 10. Eileen, are you still on? Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go for it. It's a long one.
Okay. Every nation on earth must know that our bodies were subjected to exile and the control of other countries. Our souls, however, were never driven into exile and never subjected to the power of others. We must declare openly for all to know that concerning our religion, Torah, mitzvot, and Jewish customs, we have no overlords. No method of compulsion can be effective against us. We must declare with our powerful, intense Jewish intransigence, backed by thousands of years of Jewish self-sacrifice, touch not my anointed one and persecute not my prophets.
And it continues.
May God grant us the courage not to be swayed by the bodily torture they inflict on us. On the contrary, may we accept it with joy every punishment we receive, God forbid, for sustaining a Jewish school, studying the Torah, and observing the mitzvot must fortify our courage in the sacred work of bolstering Judaism in the Soviet Union. We must remember that imprisonment and hard labor are transient. The Torah and mitzvot are eternal.
Okay, so he said this on the way to exile for spreading Judaism, and he was not scared. He said, and this is very, very true. So we could be beaten and persecuted in exile, but no one can silence the Jewish soul. So going back to the hostages from October 11th, even though they were so not religious, many of them were very, very secular. But when it came to that, they held strong.
Reminds me of that Holocaust story where there was like two guys of the same name. It was Jacob. One was very religious, one wasn't. The one who wasn't religious was completely secular, not religious at all, ate pork, ate everything. And the Nazis wanted to, punish. So they thought, oh, we'll take Jacob and we'll make him eat pork. And they picked the wrong one. Mm-hmm. So they were trying to make him eat pork, and everyone's laughing, going, well, he's just going to eat it. And no, he got beaten and he always refused to eat it. Oh. And they said, I don't understand. You eat pork, you love pork. Why didn't you do it? It's like, because they were making me. It's that part where, like he says, that part, the punishment, it was different. That part of his Jewish spark just said, no. You're trying to
all of a sudden it brought out this.
You're trying to subjugate my soul.
Exactly.
So it's not my choice.
Right. There was a Dr. Herman Braunover. He was a quantum physics professor who lived in the Soviet Union. He was a big professor there. And he and his wife started to somehow, even though they knew nothing, find Judaism. I think they started by learning, interested in Hebrew. And then from there, I went to starting to learn about Judaism. And they both ended up, they also, I'm trying to remember the story. He wrote a book. What was the book called? I don't know. I was reading his book a little while back. He wrote a book, but basically him and his wife, they both wanted to decide they wanted to leave Russia. They wanted to start to live a more religious lifestyle. And they had a young son. And actually, my mother knew him because my mother was very involved in helping Jews that came out of the Soviet Union, and so she was in touch with him a lot when he was out, whatever. So So I remember his name going up all the time. And also he like it was because he was Jewish and because they weren't allowing it, all of a sudden, like his neshama was lit, his soul was lit, and he started to learn. It's a whole story how he and his wife tried to get out, and one of them got stopped because like I forgot all the whatever. I was like reading his biography. It was like really fascinating. Eventually, they made it to Israel, and yeah, he like continued his work, his physics work over there. Very, very interesting. So we could be placed in a circumstantial exile, but inherently we're always free. So inside they're always free. So this is why we have the charoses at the Seder and why we eat it. It symbolizes that our souls were in bondage, and they were able to then, and they were able to break us then. But today, our souls are never in bondage. Today, our souls can always be free. We all have that. We have that tight attachment to God. So although our body may be in bondage, we always have to know that Hashem is always there. Hashem is with us, no matter how crazy and terrible the circumstances is. A few years ago, I actually have a book if anyone wants to borrow. There was this famous raid on this kosher meat plant, Agagri in Iowa, and they end up taking basically like a what's it called, like a scapegoat, where they took one of the owners or the CEO of the company, and they really like totally
Threw the book at him.
Worse than threw the book at him. So they said, oh, you can't have Baal because you might run away to Israel. Israel might take you, that. All these like different things. They threw like everything from the opposite sides, and like and he ends basically, and then the judge, very anti-Semitic, she gave him like the 25 to 30 years, I forgot which, somewhere around there, of imprisonment for like, which eventually he was like exonerated for some of the stuff. Like they dropped the files of one case and the other, but they used that case to try and manage. It's a whole complicated story. I have the book if you want to read it.
Where was it located again?
In Iowa,
Iowa.
Postville, Iowa. Anyway, so one of the things, so he was in jail, and here's this like very religious Jew, and he was very like very not like he was very gonna say holy in a way, like pious, like as in like he didn't care so much about material.
Are you talking about Rubashkin?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's like stuck in this jail with a whole bunch of like thugs and like blue collar, blue like just petty, whatever crimes, like murderers and big thieves and gang members and this and that. And here he is, it's like, and there may have been a few people like that weren't, and he just like did his thing. Like he would, have his whole study and his davening and his prayer, whatever he would do, and do his thing and what was going on around him. Anyway, every appeal, every single thing they tried to do to get him out, like every door closed one after the other on him. And then it came to the point where he did like the highest appeal he could do, the U.S. Court of Appeals, and he got a letter saying, sorry, we're not taking the appeal. Appeal is the wording.
We're not looking at
right.
it.
We're not rejecting the idea of appeal. We're not like allowing you an appeal. And there was like nothing left and he was already in prison for 8 years, and there's nothing left he could do, and he still had another 20 some years of prison. And he just like, at first he's like, he could be upset, he could cry, he could be like terribly depressed. And like a lot of times when this happens, they put you on suicide watch. And like it was like the last day of Hanukkah, he realized, hey, you know what? The only place I can get my salvation from now is really Hashem. There's nothing else I can do. Only Hashem can save me at this point, because I tried every single possible window, way of getting out of here. And he wasn't guilty. They just like threw crazy things at him and over exaggerated stuff. Anyway, and that was it. And then that day, at the end of the day,
that's how it was in Bulgaria.
He was called into the office, to the whatever, and they said, get your stuff, you're getting out of here. I'm like, what? And said, yeah, President Trump commuted your sentence and you're being released right now. Like, you can't even, like, they wouldn't even let him, like, barely get back and get his things. Like, they had sent someone else to get his things from his room. And he, like, within an hour, he was out.
Is he the one that came?
Yeah, he spoke here a few years ago. Yes. So I actually have 2 copies of the book. But if anyone wants to buy the book, it was very, very interesting. But his whole book,
taxes?
No, it wasn't on taxes even. No. So first they said that
It was tax invasion. It was one of the charges that was tax invasion.
No, it wasn't tax evasion. It was two things. First, they said that he employed illegals and underage minors, and then they dropped that case. And the other case was that he that was bank loans that like they that the bank that they that the bank that like the things on the bank loans weren't accurate, weren't true. They like fudged the numbers so he can get loans. Whatever. Anyway, long story. Anyway, text number 11.
Okay.
Yeah, if you read the whole book, you get the. So the Charosis tells us that the Egyptians had a hold over the Jewish souls, but today we don't have that anymore because since Hashem gave the Torah, Hashem put something inside of us, the essence of the Jew, the spark of Hashem in us, the Pintel Yid as it's called, we are forever free. Text number 11. Back to Carrie.
Hey. The hard labor they imposed on us was bitter, but it was not entirely unbearable. The mortar was a breaking point. Nothing was harsher than the mortar episode. This is why we place a symbol of the mortar on our Seder table.
Okay, so we put the Charosis on the table. We say, we declare the that the Egyptian power over us is gone. It will never be subjugated to that again. We'll be never subjugated to a spiritual hostage, spiritually hostage again. So our core is always with Hashem. And that's why we celebrate the leaving Egypt, even if we had other sufferings and other exiles. But our spiritual survivor was never at risk after that point. And now we can understand the two different views. So by putting the Haroses, that symbol of intrinsic subjugation, on the table and declaring our freedom is one thing, and eating it, internalizing it with the matzah shows a total liberation. So it's something else. So one thing is having it on the table, and one thing is having it with the matzah. It's two different things. So one thing, yes, we had this subjugation that could have overtaken our souls, but now that we got liberated, we're eating with the matzah. This puts us in a place that no matter what happens today, no matter how bad the exiles are today, since we have that connection with Hashem, since we have that inner spark, well, we will never be totally like enslaved as we were back in Egypt. Okay, so let us read text number 12.
Based on the above, we can explain the dispute between Maimonides and Rabbi Abraham about dipping matzah into Parosa and the distinction between the era of the temple and the era of exile. When the temple stood, it was possible to entirely fulfill the commandment to remember being enslaved in Egypt and going free because we were still free. We could remember that you were enslaved, Deuteronomy 5:15, as if we were ourselves enslaved and then granted our freedom. Therefore, all agreed that it was appropriate to dip the matzah in charoset to demonstrate that God took us from slavery to freedom. However, today, now that we are in exile, we can't fulfill in its entirety the commandment to remember that you were enslaved and liberated because we are no longer free. Therefore, the question is whether it is possible to fulfill it in part. Can we celebrate being redeemed from the unique intrinsic subjugation in Egypt, since we are still free of intrinsic subjugation despite being back in circumstantial subjugation, as we explained above? Maimonides believed it is possible to fulfill this commandment in part. He therefore rules that we dip matzah into charoset to celebrate that we were liberated from intrinsic mortar subjugation symbolized by the charoset, though we remain in circumstantial subjugation. Rabbi Abraham disagreed and held that freedom can't be parsed. We are either free or not. Accordingly, although we tell the story of the Exodus in detail, we nevertheless can't fulfill its entirety the commandment to remember that you were enslaved and went free while we are back in circumstantial subjugation.
Because I just want to go back over here to show you these slides to help you understand it.
I don't really understand.
Okay, look here. So let's just look at this. Let's make it easier. Okay, the Harosas. Read that.
The Haroset on the Seder table declares that Egypt and all subsequent enemies cannot hold power over our essence. We remain inherently free.
And now here's the two.
Maimonides, by dipping the matzah into Haroset, we affirm that even if we are not fully free, we're free in essence. And that's what we celebrate on the Seder night. Rabbi Abraham, if we're not fully free, highlighting partial freedom can backfire and cause Jews to focus on what we're lacking.
Okay.
Okay, and let me just see if there's another one after that. Oops. So what happened? I just lost my show. Oh. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Okay. So today as we said before, we practice with Rabbi Abraham, which we do not dip our matzah in our harosas. Yes, we eat harosas, we eat it officially with the mar, and then we eat it afterwards. But the official ritual of eating the matzah, we do not eat it with the harosas because we are still in exile, because we're still in. Okay, so you might feel more like the Maimonides way. You might feel like, oh, let's just eat it because we have to remember that intrinsically that we know theoretically we are free. You might feel no, if once we start to do that, we'll only see the glass as half. Well, we'll see the glass as half. Basically, the Rambam Maimonides, we see the glass as half full, and Rabbi Avraham, we see the glass as half empty. Which way are we looking at it?
Who is Rabbi Abraham?
He's known as the Ravid, if you ask your
The rival? What?
the Ravid.
Temporary
From Avram ben David or something. I think he lived
Oh,
the Rambam.
always better to look at the cup full because
Oh,
it's no
explain to
point
them,
in
they-
looking at empty.
They were like,
you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's what they all at the same time? Yeah.
yeah,
Let's take it
because
like that.
he wasn't the
Oh, so maybe the other one, the Minhag was okay. Anyway,
Abraham ben David was
Yeah.
1125 to 1198,
yeah.
and Maimonides was 1135 to 1204.
Oh, okay, so it was the same time. Okay, fine. Okay, so we might look at it, hey, we're partially free, it's not as bad as we were then, and so Maimonides, the glass is half full. We may look at it as, hey, we're still under foreign rule, things, it's not all the way good, so half empty, let's not do this, right? So either way, it doesn't change the halacha. We still do what the custom is to do, which is we don't dip it in today. We do dip it in the marar when we eat our matzah plain. So why do we eat foods that recognize our suffering? Why do we enjoy harosas? To begin, as we said, it tastes delicious because harosas it carries
Possibility.
we could say, oh, people are ignorant, or they look at the, or they don't really know why we eat it. It's okay, it tastes good, and it's fun, and whatever it is, and that's it. But it reminds us. But we look at the ingredients, we see the ingredients are really sweet, and it's really delicious. And we say, hey, our soul is always free. Our spark of godliness, the essence of the Jew, is there. In Egypt, it was in jeopardy, but we survived Egypt. We're still here. Paro did not survive, and that's why the harosas is sweet. It's still, we're always reminds us that we always prevail. Jewish people are always alive. Our religion always stayed.
I think in my grandparents, we never ate that.
The harosas.
It was just
on the table, and you just dip a little bit of it into the maror. So that's what it says to do in the Haggadah. You dip it, and then as she said, you shake it off. Someone said, Berlin said, you shake it off. You're supposed to dip it in and then shake it off. And then you take it. But it became a thing. Oh, everyone eats harosas.
Right.
But so we're saying it's not just a new thing, it's an old thing. It's going back all those centuries. Okay, so let's read text 13.
Sephardi haroset.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're really
Read it.
If you want. Lisa's turn.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You read it.
A haroset should be thick because it's a testament to the mortar by which our ancestors were subjugated. Then we must soften the consistency with a liquid to remember the blood. It is appropriate to soften it with a red liquid such as mead or red wine. It is appropriate to make the haroset of fruits that serve as metaphors for the Jewish people, such as figs. As it is written, the fig tree has put forth its green figs. Nuts, as it is written, I went down to the nut garden. Dates, as it is written, let me climb up the palm tree. Pomegranate, as it is written, like a split pomegranate. Apples, as it is written, under the apple tree where the Jewish woman gave birth without pain. And almonds, for God was diligent about thinking our exile.
So a sweet food with a sour thing.
That's
So
the altar Rebbe.
yeah.
You can make it with all
see,
sorts of
isn't that
different
interesting?
fruits.
So it's interesting, all these what's it called, quotes, all these like references are all from Song of Songs, which is like the allegoric love story for some of the Jewish people.
So just quote this and tell them you're making it with figs and
yeah. So it reminds us that against all odds, we overcame. We're still here. We're here to speak about it. We triumphed. And as Mashiach is getting closer, as the time Mashiach is closer, we see more and more positive aspects of the Harosis. We see that the people are yearning for godliness. The Jewish people are learning to connect. They're learning to get there. Their spark of godliness is shining, not hiding away. And so maybe that's why the Harosis is becoming so much more and more popular. For sure, once Mashiach comes, we'll dip our matzah in the Haroset, because then we'll really be free, not just in soul, but in body too.
will we still have to eat matzah on Passover?
That's a really good question. I'm not gonna get to all of that. Will we still have Passover?
Yeah.
There's so many different discussions about it.
Yeah.
But another side note is everyone uses apples for the Haroses, and apples symbolize that it says that the Jewish woman gave birth in the apple fields in the time of Egypt, because they were hiding from the Egyptians who wanted to kill the babies, and that they would leave them in the apple fields, and it said the angels would raise them in the apple fields, and then when the Jews left Egypt, all those children that were born like joined up with them and left Egypt with them. Like they're all like somehow in hiding, and the angels took care of them. That's a medrash that talks about that. Anyway, so everyone
Why didn't Miriam do that, or not Miriam?
Huh?
Why didn't they do that with Moses?
I don't know. Maybe it will happen later. I don't know, but earlier or later. Anyway, thank you guys all for joining. Have a great Pesach.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you for a wonderful shirt getting us ready for
Thank you,
Pesach.
sorry.
Yes.
I'll come on Saturday.
Partying.
I'm free this Saturday.